Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Wynna Wong. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. A panel of judges rules that a magistrate committed a serious error in the case of a teacher who assaulted a policeman. The annual book fair closes with visitors making a last-ditch effort to get bargains. And the Pope apologizes for abuse at residential schools in Canada. A panel handling complaints against judges has concluded that a magistrate had committed a serious error by remanding a man in the Siloam Psychiatric Center without factual basis. But accusations of a biased ruling were dismissed. Raymond Young reports.
Former teacher Yang Pok-man was jailed for 9 weeks in 2020 after he was convicted of assaulting a police officer in the previous year. But complaints flooded in against trial magistrate Debbie Ng, who accused the defendant of suffering from a mental disorder for thinking that policemen would throw him off a bridge. She also questioned whether Yang was mentally fit to teach and remanded him in Siloam Psychiatric Center. Yang has since been dismissed by his school. After investigating for nearly 2 years, the judiciary finally published its findings. While a panel of judges ruled that complaints of bias were not substantiated, it ruled that Ng committed a serious error. The panel said the magistrate's observations did not objectively provide any factual basis to question Yang's mental state. Whether Yang was fit to continue to teach was a matter for the Education Bureau to decide, the panel added. Led astray by her persistent but erroneous view, Ng had wrongfully exercised her judicial power, causing considerable stress to the defendant. Chief Justice Andrew Cheung endorsed the panel's findings and urged Ng to reflect on her handling of the case and avoid repeating the mistake in the future. Raymond Yang, HKIBC.
Exhibitors at this year's book fair say there wasn't much of an impact on sales, even though students were still in school. Instead, parents went bargain hunting on behalf of their children. Janet Lowe reports.
Today was the final day of the annual book fair, but the main halls in the Convention and Exhibition Center were rather quiet in the morning. This was mainly because the summer holiday for students has been delayed. But this publisher brushed off the reduction in the number of student customers, saying sales were not affected.
So for this year, compared with last year, that we got 50% more than last year because the interest for the books from the parents and the kids still very strong market.
Bargain hunters were out in force on the last day of the annual book fair. Some parents came equipped with suitcases and hope to get enough books to keep their children busy when the summer break begins next month.
Parents, either visiting the Wan Chai venue alone or coming after picking up their children from school, hunted for books for youngsters and supplementary exercises until the very last minute. This woman, who visited the fair for the first time with her 8-year-old son, appreciated the discounts that the publishers offered.
Generally, I purchase these English books from other places. Generally, quite good price, good offers. So at least based on the books I chose, I feel quite satisfied.
By the afternoon, visitors flocked to the halls in the hundreds as publishers slashed prices to clear their stocks. Janice Lowe, HKIBC.
Over 90% of primary 6 students will be going to one of their top 3 choices for secondary schools in the coming academic term. This is the highest satisfaction rate in the secondary school places allocation in 15 years. Joanna Ho reports.
This school, Yamati Catholic Primary School, Hoi Wang Road, had an allocation satisfaction rate of 94.2%, slightly higher than the city's overall figure. The Education Bureau said 94% of almost 50,000 primary 6 students gained a place in their top 3 choices for secondary schools. This student had been expecting bad news, but was overjoyed after realizing that she'll be studying at her first choice school, the elite Queen Elizabeth School in Mong Kok. These 3 good friends will remain together next term when all were admitted to Wynna College Kowloon, one of Hong Kong's prestigious secondary schools. Parents were also proud with the results. But some still decided to knock on the doors of schools considered to be better, although their children secured a good result. Principal Polly Chan urged parents to take an enterprising approach when selecting schools this year, as there are more places than students. Chan and Vice Principal Chan Yun-hing said this was because of several factors.
I think immigration is one of the reasons of this.
And maybe more parents, they will choose to apply for the direct subsidy school or some private schools or some international schools in Hong Kong, so maybe this will affect the rate also.
To secure their place, students must register at their allocated secondary school with an allocation or admission slip on Thursday or Friday. If they fail to do so, they would lose their slot. Joanna Ho, HKIBC.
Health officials have reinforced their message to the elderly: get COVID jabs as soon as possible and seek help via specific hotlines if they contract the virus. This came as more senior citizens died at home after being infected.
We have various channels for these patients to seek help. Apart from the what we have already have the telephone hotline, which is 1-836-115. We also will ask our colleagues to identify those patients who are at risk, and we will contact them proactively. With these opportunities, we can then prescribe them with the medication.
Communicable Disease Branch Head Chuang Shuk Kwan urged family members to help elderly people report their infections. She said video consultation services with medics could be arranged. Hong Kong today recorded 4,276 new COVID infections, 301 of which were imported. There were 6 COVID-related deaths. 11 schools, including Ching Chung Hao Po Wun Secondary School in Tuen Mun, were advised to suspend classes for a week. Hong Kong's annual economic growth forecast may be downgraded further amid concerns by Financial Secretary Paul Chan that the city is on the brink of a technical recession. Some economists say there is a case for a downward adjustment because of declining external demand and rising interest rates. Chloe Feng reports.
Hong Kong's second quarter economic estimates will be released next Monday. But in an interview with the South China Morning Post, Financial Chief Paul Chan warned that the city could be on the brink of a technical recession, which is 2 consecutive quarters with negative growth. This may force the government to further downgrade its annual GDP growth forecast. In May, Chan lowered the growth forecast to 1 to 2% for 2022. While consumption received a boost from the rollout of digital vouchers, performance in the export and investment sectors remain unsatisfactory. Some economists agree with Chan's assessment.
First is that it's really about this prolonged damage on consumer sentiment that people are still quite worried about these uncertainties from this COVID policy. And externally speaking, there will also be higher pressure in terms of the whether global demand will be weakened further, and then whether China will be able to step out of the zero COVID policy for a strong economic rebound. Back in February, we have downgraded our forecast to 1% for 2022.
The financial secretary acknowledged that travel restrictions were the most critical constraint. He reiterated that the government is actively working with the mainland and the international community on reopening the border. Chloe Fong, HKIBC.
Overseas now, Pope Francis has apologized to Canada's Indigenous community for the abusive Catholic residential schools that operated as recently as 1996. Many survivors saw the move as a meaningful step towards reconciliation, but made it clear they are owed much more.
In the system.
It was an emotional moment for many survivors gathered in Alberta to hear Pope Francis speak. I humbly beg for forgiveness for the evil committed by so many Christians against the Indigenous people, he said. The historic apology was made on the grounds of the Ermineskin Residential School in Mascatchees, one of the 70 Catholic-run institutions across Canada that operated from the 1870s to 1990s. Over 150,000 Native children were forced to attend the schools, to be stripped of their Indigenous culture, and be assimilated into white society. There have long been reports of rampant sexual, physical, and emotional abuse in those schools, but the issue only gained international attention last year after the remains of 200 children were found in mass graves at a school in British Columbia.
I've waited 50 years for this apology, and finally today I heard it. And unfortunately, a lot of my family members, friends, classmates, and members of my community that went to residential school were not able to hear it because they had passed on through suicide, alcohol addiction, and other substance abuse or whatnot, because they could not endure or live with the trauma that they endured in these residential schools.
The Pope is on a 6-day penitential pilgrimage to fulfill his promise to apologize on Canadian soil. Shares of Alibaba gained 4.8% on news that the e-commerce giant is seeking a primary listing in Hong Kong while continuing to trade in New York. The upgrade from a secondary listing will enable mainland investors to buy Alibaba shares through Stock Connect. The Hangzhou-based firm hopes to complete the process by the end of the year. The company, meanwhile, said 7 Ant Group executives have stepped down from the Alibaba partnership, signaling a further decoupling between the two. Spurred by Alibaba, Hong Kong stocks recovered from a one-week low. The Hang Seng Index closed 1.7% higher after surging in the opening hour on a tech sector rally. Mainland developers continued a winning run, following reports that Beijing will launch a fund to help resolve a debt crisis in the property sector. Country Garden jumped 13.4%, while Longfor was up 3.7%. A look at the markets now. The Hang Seng Index closed up 342 points. Top 10 active stocks tracker fund up 34 cents. Alibaba up $4.80. Hong Kong Exchange is up $12.40. JD up $4.40. In foreign exchange rates, the euro is at 7.94, British pound 9.40. And in UK markets, the FTSE is up 43 points. Researchers believe that hydroponic farming may be the answer to the lack of land and labor. A research center set up by the government and the Vegetable Marketing Organization has been working on improving the technology. Maisie Mock reports.
An indoor farming technique called hydroponics is being touted as the answer to manpower and land shortages. The Controlled Environment Hydroponic Research and Development Center began research 3 years ago to help local farmers. It has installed several mobile cultivation racks at its Phase 2 center in Cheung Wan as part of a new mobile hydroponic cultivation system. By just pressing a button, researchers can move each rack with ease and place them closely together to reduce occupied space. Staff can also control the racks remotely. The center has collaborated with the Chinese university to develop robots that can plant seeds and work in the cultivation room. Apart from eliminating human labor, this opens the way for 24-hour farming. The center has introduced an aeroponic cultivation system which uses less water and electricity than conventional hydroponics for cultivation. Researchers have gone one step further with technology, which means they don't have to go into the cultivation room. They can control the temperature, humidity, and the amount of nutrients with a remote master control panel. The successful cultivation of watercress, purple pak choi seedling, and calendula shows that the system is viable. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
A look at the weather before we go. It will continue to be fine and very hot over the next few days. Tomorrow, expect temperatures to range from 29 to 35 degrees Celsius. There may be some isolated showers on Friday. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. And that's our main news for Tuesday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Wynna Wong. Good night.